son. It's just very sad.
Let me raise this with you.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to sound harsh.
Okay.
Okay. There are signs that you
Yes.
cannot save these kids. There are signs that no matter how much you love these kids will kill you. They will harm you.
Oh.
Sometimes you have to make a decision to cut off the arm to save the household. When will parents realize that some of these kids are just monsters? They're evil.
Well,
And they can't be saved.
well, here's the thing. When that child is a minor, the parent
How old
is
was the kid?
responsible. A minor, 15.
15.
A minor. So we're talking about someone who the parent is responsible for. Here's what we believe the solution is. We believe that there are individuals who cannot safely be in a home. But what we don't have, Armstrong, is we don't have treatment centers, facilities for individuals who are dealing with extreme mental health issues, extreme addiction issues, where they can go not just for 24, 48, or 72 hours, but they can go for an extended period of time to get real treatment from professionals. Because parents love their children. They do. And they're responsible for them by law. But the truth is, we do need to help parents in so many ways, because not every child has the ability to be safe within a home. And you're right. In that home or other homes, there are children who are violent. Maybe they took the wrong type of drug and now their brains are just like out of whack. But who then is responsible for that child? How do we help that child and the family? How do we ensure that everyone is safe and we don't have a tragedy? We as government, our medical system, we have to provide services for families dealing with the real issues of mental health, and we can't pretend like they don't exist, because they do.
And you know, Dominique, the sad part is that there are families that live in fear of their children, and they're in prison in their own homes, and they're scared to death.
Yeah, we have families that are afraid to do their job and discipline kids too, because what have we seen over the last 20 years? Parents can't be parents. You know, I grew up in the 70s, and it was a very heavy-handed classical conditioning, and we do not support that now, right? Timeouts, taking away their toys. The state got involved, right? DCFS, Department of Child Family Services, where if you went out to dinner and your child acted up and you classically conditioned, physically disciplined your child, the table next to you could call 911 and you could find yourself in jail. So what would happen from there is we would get calls. You know, domestic, child out of control, show up in the house, and what do you have? You have 14-year-old swearing at the parents, out of control at the parents, and the parents expecting us to do something about it. This is a bad epidemic, because parents do not know. They don't know how to wind up it is training. It's classically conditioning your child. Sometimes that heavy hand is love in the worst perceived way, but we claim it's child abuse. And then what you have is it goes all the way to the streets, to where you get the bloodthirsty mob watching cops beat the crap out of suspects on the street because they never got it at home. So now you expect your law enforcement to dish out the punishment when that's not their job. This was a massive problem at least 20 years ago, starting when the state got involved with telling parents when and how they could or couldn't discipline their children at home.
Dominique, what do you want to add to this?
The chemical, I mean, I'm going to be 50 in March, so we're the same age. We didn't grow up like this. And the chemicals, so there needs to be a study done, and I bet you 20 years from now, we'll see that these kids who are being poisoned with food, with medication, with the conditioning. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a 5-year-old niece, and she grew up watching that Coco Melon show. And I couldn't understand why it was so addictive until you look and you see, parents need to see every 3 to 5 seconds, that show changes a panel and a scene on beat. You can count it out to keep the kids constantly stuck in and drawn to it. So these kids are being poisoned with the food. They're being poisoned with whatever medication that, you got to quiet them down. So let's take them to the doctor, find out what the meds they need. And then they're being conditioned by whatever's being pumped into their brains by these devices nonstop. We don't have parents that interact with their kids because the parents are on their phones too nonstop. These kids are neglected. They are not disciplined. They're not formatted properly for a functioning society. And yeah, by the time they turn 15, think of that hormone level in young males. testosterone running amok, identity crisis. They're not a man, they're not a boy, they don't know where they belong. They need somebody to be heard. But then if you look into society as young men, we're taught that no, your feelings don't matter. You don't need to be heard. You need to stifle all that. This is it's a very, very, very conflicting time for all these kids, and they don't have outlets for it. And they don't have people who properly understand it yet. Because our generation, it's not something we even know about, and we're trying to learn in the process how to deal with them.
You know, Dominique, from your experience, what are some of the most common challenges that police officers face when responding to these domestic violence calls? And it seems like, because police officers tell me all the time, the most dangerous place for law enforcement is a domestic violence dispute that they walk into.
It is. You know your home better than somebody else does, especially a stranger. Tensions are always arise. It's a he said, she said. I will sadly say this. You do have a lot of women who manipulate the situation. Know all they have to do is call 911 and get their boyfriends or husbands removed. And then when it comes to the children, one of the most challenging things that you now have with law enforcement is the following of commands. I was an FTO, a field training officer, and in the class that I took to become a field training officer, the lieutenant told us, grown adults, that the new recruits that were coming in, get it out of your vocabulary, meaning us, because I said so. That was no longer an acceptable phrase to use, even in an emergency, because the new younger recruits coming in were going to question you nonstop. Well, in law enforcement, there are times we come up, we say, sit down, shut up, and X, Y, and Z. And the kids will challenge cops. And it turns into an escalating, I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do whatever. Because you have parents who, in my opinion, try to relate to their children more. They try to be friends with their children more. And that kid then goes through life thinking that their opinion is more valuable than anyone else. And where do you see that? You see chaos in school. No respect for teachers. Chaos on the street with cops. Chaos on the street with bosses. If a boss says, hey, this is your job, go do X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't have to. Why? So one of the biggest challenging things that we see is the idea that all you have to do is reason and logic and listen to these children. There are times when no means no, and if no is not followed, a physical state change must be done.
Hold that point. Your final thoughts in about 30 seconds.
Old school parenting is important, and I think if we can help our younger parents with that old school parenting, I think what we'll see is a big difference in how our children show up. And they need to show up and be able to communicate with people, show respect to authority, and respect for themselves and their peers.
Listen, I cannot thank all of our guests, Robert Patillo, Sam Faddis, Bruce Fine, Dominique Izzo, and Ms. Brayboy for joining us. I'm Armstrong Williams. Good night.